The trees here are twisted and skeletal, their branches clawing at the sky like hands of the damned. The air is cold, unnaturally so, and the faint mist curls around your feet like ghostly tendrils. Shadows dance where there is no light, and every step feels like trespass in the forbidden ground. The silence is oppressive, broken only by distant creaks and groans, as though the forest itself is alive and restless. You swear you see movement in the corner of your vision, but when you turn, there's nothing there but the darkness.
The darkness.
Welcome to Wizards of the Tower,
Roleplay.
where we talk everything role-playing games. And in this episode, forest as a setting in your RPG. Welcome to Wizards of the Tower.
Roleplay.
And we're going to be talking a little bit about forests in your RPG. Now, forests to me are a very integral part of your adventures, your campaigns.
Yeah.
Because Hansel and Gretel, they lived in the woods. They went into the woods and got lost and got found by the witch.
Robin Hood in Sherwood Forest.
Yeah, bandits.
The forests in Tolkien's books.
Yes, Fangorn.
Yep, Fangorn.
Or Lothlorien.
Yep.
All of those are very key to RPGs, and there are many, many, many different types of forest to think about. Now, what got me thinking about doing an episode about forests is we had our vacation this year, and we've been to this location many times, but we went to the Pacific Northwest.
Yep.
We absolutely love the Pacific Northwest.
We do.
The forests there are just
fantastic.
They're mind-numbing. You walk through them,
yeah.
And the ferns that you have,
the diversity of life, the mosses, the trees.
Yeah.
It's wonderful, and we both enjoy it tremendously.
Mm-hmm. And it really started getting me thinking about forests. You know, describing your forests when you're doing your RPG here.
Yeah.
So we're going to hit upon these and try to do as many as we can.
Yeah, there's plenty. I mean, there's obviously a lot of forested settings, okay? And we don't mean to say that you should always have a forest in your setting, because in the past, Delaney's had a desert campaign. That was all deserts. That was desert and rock. We've had campaigns that took place on the water. We've had campaigns that took place on ice, things like that. So it doesn't always have to be an integral part of your setting, but we're just giving you an idea of how to incorporate it into your setting by giving you some different types of forests you can think about.
And when we hit upon these, I'm going to do a little bit of a description. I've got a lot more descriptions for these, but we're going to hit just upon a little bit of the description.
Sure.
So the first one we're going to hit upon is a tropical rainforest. You step into the humid and vibrant world where sunlight barely reaches the forest floor. Through the dense canopy of broad green leaves, the air is thick with the earthy smell of damp soil and the sweet aroma of blooming flowers. Now, a tropical rainforest.
Well, it could be a jungle, but it could also be a rainforest,
right?
Which is kind of different. So it depends on how you're making your way through it, and the different kind of things that live there. Tropics. It's warm. It's humid. You've got lizards.
Lizardmen.
Lizardmen, snakes, big insects, big flowers.
Wildcats that are hidden.
Jaguars, wildcats.
Trolls.
You could have tropical related sort of creatures that might hang out in there. Maybe trolls of a certain type. Maybe elementals of a certain type. Tropical rainforests differ from swamps in the fact that, yes, they're wet, but it's usually wet from rain, like dripping. Whereas swamps, you're just kind of inundated with swampy, muddy water.
Whether you're ankle deep or head deep.
Yeah. So, I think the one time we did a campaign with a tropical rainforest, that was the Lizard Man campaign, and we had the pyramids, the lizard men.
Yes, yes.
And that was really well. It was really interesting.
It was a jungle.
It was a jungle, kind of a jungle. The thing about a jungle is you can't really get through it unless you hack your way through with a machete. Tropical rainforest, you can still work your way through the trails.
And the snakes were so big they could swallow you guys whole.
Yeah, and we had problems with big giant snakes, so we had to watch out. So there, you're going to have some dangerous animals in something like that.
Well, also the temples had the Yen-Ti, the snake people.
Yeah,
So it was a good setting for that.
Pretty cool setting.
Yeah. The Temperate Deciduous Forest. The forest is alive with the golden hues of autumn, leaves crunching beneath your boots as you walk beneath the trees that stretch endlessly skyward. Oak, maple, and birch trees create a patchwork of fiery reds, oranges, and yellows. And that's just the setting in the fall.
I tend to think of a forest like this as kind of like Sherwood Forest, where Robin Hood lives.
Yeah, and most of us are very familiar with more of the temperate style rainforest.
Yeah.
Or not temperate rainforest, but the temperate deciduous forest. That's your broadleaf trees.
Yeah, it's kind of like the Midwestern United States. You've got cottonwoods, blackjack oaks, walnuts, hickory, ashes, whatever. This is kind of your typical urban woodlands that you have, or your area. Most people in their lives would just go picnicking in a little state park that has something like this. And this is your kind of elven forest. You may have wolves there, sprites, druids, made up of oak trees.
Yeah.
Typically, you don't have a lot of pine trees and stuff like that. This is sort of your trees. Hardwoods. They're really thick and covering in the spring and the summer.
Poison ivy.
But in the fall, the canopy starts to drop, and all of a sudden, everything's wide open because all the trees have lost their leaves.
Yeah.
So it varies from season to season how you want to play that out. Do you want to play it as a summer forest where there's a lot of thick cover, and you've got full of bandits, and you've got all kinds of creatures hiding in the underbrush? Or do you want to play it out for the fall and the winter where the snow is a little deep, but you can see through it because all the leaves have fallen?
Yeah, and the trees look dead and they're bare.
Yeah, and you've got like bare trees, like wiggling in the wind, clawing at the sky or clawing at you as you go past, that sort of thing.
The Boreal Forest, or the Taiga. The towering evergreens stretch endlessly, their spindly tops swaying gently in a cold wind that whispers of snow and secrets. Pine needles blanket the ground, muffling your steps with a sharp scent of resin fills the crisp air.
So a boreal forest is sort of like an ancient forest. It's the ancient taiga forest belt that kind of circles the Arctic. Mm-hmm. If you're familiar with this kind of thing, it's northern Russia, Scandinavia, Canada, northern Alaska, that sort of thing. The taiga can go on forever. It could be 1,000 miles of forest. It could be hundreds of miles of forest. Usually it's the same kind of trees, birches, different kind of evergreens, mm-hmm. that sort of thing. And typically taigas, and boreal forests are ancient. They're old and they're cold because it's from a cold climate. Right. And so you've got a cold setting. Now, we had an adventure that was set in a forest like that.
Yeah, it was the last campaign I ran.
And it was one of the coolest campaigns because we actually finished it from start to finish over like 2.5 years.
Yep.
And it was awesome because we got to finish it. And it took place in the winter. And we had to be mindful of what we were doing. Always traveling with winter clothing, always having winter gear. It was really something.
Yeah. It didn't actually happen in the winter, but there was something going on that was causing the winter to not go away. So
it was like endless winter, basically. And even though the seasons were changing, it was still very wintry.
Yeah. Yeah.
So who would live in like an ancient taiga?
Well, you could have, your bears and your wolves, an ancient wendigo.
Yeah.
Maybe a frost troll.
Yeah.
Frost giants, maybe.
Yeah, you'd have a whole variety of wolves, dire wolves. You'd have all sorts of deep forest dwelling, Scandinavian mythology sorts of animals, different types of trolls, different types of fey creatures of that sort living there. Maybe some evil elves or something, living in this environment. Mm-hmm. Maybe some ice beings or some snow beings or wood beings, ancient wood beings who live deep in the forest.
Yep.
That sort of thing. I like this kind of idea because, I'm from a colder climate and I love the idea of cold forests. I feel most comfortable in something like that. And so for me, it's easy for me
imagine.
to imagine what I'm doing as I'm moving through a forest of this type.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I like this. I like that kind of setting.
So we have the Coniferous Forest. Dark green conifers dominate the skyline, their spiky silhouettes contrasting against a gray sky. The ground is uneven and littered with pine cones, needles, and patches of snow that refuse to melt, even in the warmer seasons.
So Coniferous Forest is sort of like different from a taiga because we have Coniferous Forest all through the United States, the
Yes.
Rocky Mountains, even places in the Smoky Mountains, places like that. Even in the upper states in the United States,
Yeah.
like in Maine,
The Great Lakes region.
Great Lakes region, that sort of thing. It has a variety typically of different sorts of trees, different sorts of landscapes. We have that here out west. In the western United States, we have that kind of forest. And it's different from the taiga because there's a variety there, and it probably isn't such an ancient forest. It may burn, it may grow again, it may do all this stuff, but it doesn't seem to have that ancient permanence that the Boreal forest has.
It doesn't have the hundreds or 1,000-year-old trees.
Exactly. And so this may be a forest that we're all pretty much kind of familiar with, especially if you go out to state parks or you hang out in the mountains or whatever you do. Pine trees everywhere.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. And there's always a mixture of like aspens or something else in there. And so you get a lot of things like owl bears, bears in general, cougars, dryads, rock-dwelling creatures, earth-dwelling creatures.
Yeah, probably your hill giants, because your hills are covered in those kind of
kind of like
trees.
mountain giants and stuff like that. This is when you start running into, in my opinion, you start running into like wizards, druids, living in the forest, existing on forest magic, that sort of thing. You may have witches, where you have a witch house buried deep in the forest on top of a hill or in the mountains somewhere. It's a great place for settings because there's a variety. It could be anything. It could be swift-moving streams. It could have caves. It could have also. I mean, if you've ever played Skyrim, you know what I'm talking about.
Yes.
the settings in there are just an endless variety of different sorts of settings: lakes, streams, rivers, waterfalls, caves, rock falls, anything like that. And so it provides a great sort of variety.
Mangrove Forest. The ground gives way to brackish water as you enter the tangled maze of mangrove trees. Gnarled roots rise like natural bridges and walls, twisting in impossible shapes, the reflections shimmering in the shallow water below.
So mangroves, not particularly common in the United States, maybe someplace in Florida, definitely more common in the Caribbean. If you're going to set your setting...
Possibly in parts of Central and
South America, right. Mangroves, of course, provide a very necessary barrier along coastlines from coastal flooding, big waves, that sort of thing.
Erosion.
They exist floating in the water, and so if you've ever seen some of these pirate movies where they're going through with their pirogue, going through the Piragua, going through the swamp area, and you've got the big mangroves and the big roots where things are hiding. The roots are kind of like these arches that come down, and they're
really hard to navigate.
Yeah, they can be really dense to trying to get through that. Now, this kind of setting is more about amphibious creatures, frog creatures, lizards, snakes,
Crocs,
crocodiles, swampy kind of things,
cursed monsters,
maybe beings who live there, are aquatic or semi-aquatic.
Yeah.
You may have elementals that are definitely water elementals.
So again, there might be living on the land.
Yeah.
The fish people.
Yeah, and you might have people who spend some time in the water, some time on land. Definitely a lot of insects. Different from a sort of a swampy area because I think mainly travel through mangrove coastal forests is by boat.
Now, in Pirate Board, you guys actually went to an island that the majority of the island was surrounded by mangrove.
I remember that. It was
hard only to get on through. One little area. They found a little spot.
Yeah.
That had a dock on it.
Yeah.
That they could get to.
A travel through that island was almost impossible, except along that strip where some of the area had been cleared out.
Yeah.
And you were able to make your way through the jungle, chopping your way with your cutlass as you went through.
And there were undead pirate skeletons.
There were tons of them, and it was a pretty good setting for undead. I got to tell you, for undead pirates, it was scary. The first time we had experienced it, we had to retreat and leave because there were way too many of them. And so when we came back, we had more people, and it worked out a little bit better.
The Enchanted Forest. The moment you step into the woods, you feel a tingling at the back of your neck. The trees shimmer faintly as though dusted with silver, and their leaves glow faintly in hues of emerald, gold, and violet. Strange flowers bloom in vibrant colors along the moss-covered forest floor, releasing a faint glow that illuminates your path.
Well, it's a magical forest, right?
It's very much a magical forest.
Yeah.
It's where your fae, your unicorns, your ents, ancient spirits, which might be guarding a forgotten treasure.
Yeah, the thing about Enchanted Forest is that essentially, I mean, that comes from mythology. Hansel and Gretel.
Yes.
You know, the Enchanted Forest, where the witch lives, where there's magical beings, where there's elves, where there's fairies.
You get spirited away, you
fae.
get taken away,
Yeah.
you're kidnapped and lost. Almost like a Rip Van Winkle type thing.
Exactly. You think that, you know the way, you walk a few steps in, you turn around, you've realized you've lost your way, and you could stay lost in an enchanted forest forever. The whole concept is that it came about because people were afraid of forests. They were afraid of getting lost in them. You know, it's difficult to navigate. You can't really see the stars. Mm-hmm. If you don't carry a personal compass with you, you don't know the directions.
You get lost real easy.
You get lost easy. You get turned
changes.
around. The path can change. You could become turned around a stream, and you think it looks one way, and you're walking this way, but it changes as you're walking that way. Mirkwood's a good example.
Yeah.
If you've ever seen the Hobbit movies, when they get lost in Mirkwood, it's really a good way, you know, to play out the story, that you can get lost. And you know, there's a road supposedly that you're supposed to follow, but the road branches off and goes this way and that way, and it's broken, and the trees have broken up through the road, and the roots
lose yourself. So
you
think you're going down the path, and you lose yourself off the path.
Exactly. Yeah. So, Enchanted Forest would differ from other types of magical forests in the sense that it may not necessarily be evil, but it is definitely a sort of a difficult terrain that you have to tackle and make a lot of saves to maintain your sanity in there.
Yeah, yeah. So the next one is one that I did at the start of the episode, which was the Haunted Forest. The trees here are twisted and skeletal, the branches clawing at the sky like the hands of the damned. Now the Haunted Forest is exactly that. Yeah. Haunted. It looks creepy as all can be. Most of the trees may be dead and all twisted and gnarled, and you might see faces in them. And this is where your undead are going to be, your ghosts and possibly your wraiths and wights and other cursed creatures, maybe even witches.
So the really cool thing about this, about Haunted Forest, is that that's where you get a lot of settings. You get a lot of wizards, specters, witches, ghouls, goblins, ghosts, orcs, evil things, undead things, haunted stuff, a lot of ghost type apparitions, a lot of curses, a lot of mind altering stuff that's happening, you know, in this forest. This is like Halloween stuff here, you know, horror movies.
Yeah.
Dracula, you know, the setting of Transylvania, well, the typical idea of Transylvania, you know, setting in this deep, you know, Carpathian Alps with the deep rugged forest that no one dares to tread because
werewolves are there.
Yeah, werewolves. People have gone in and never come out, senor. Don't go there. That kind of thing. It's really interesting in the sense that I think that the Haunted Forest really, more so than almost any other thing, is what scares people about going into the woods. They're worried about the creatures that are lurking behind every tree, ready to trip you up, ready to attack you.
The tree that reaches up from the ground and
the roots that trip you, that sort of thing. You fall into a hole in the ground, you can't get out, you get trapped in the roots, you tumble down a crevasse down amongst all the dead trees, and you can't find your way back out again.
Yeah.
It's an endless setting for scary horrors type.
It's a great setting.
Yeah, for kind of adventures that are set in that thing.
Yeah. The Savanna Woodland. The open forest is scattered with thorny, acacious and grassy clearings, where golden light pours down from unobstructed. The dry earth crunches beneath your feet, and the air is heavy with the scent of dust and sun-warmed vegetation. So this is sort of like Africa, like the brushlands, the Kalahari, American Southwest, places in southern Spain, Yeah.
And maybe even in places in certain parts of Asia, Mongolia.
Yeah, where it's dry.
Yeah, dry. You got kind of like thorn bushes, short trees. You get a lot of sun. You don't get a lot of shade. It's an interesting setting because you don't come across it very often.
No.
Because it's really difficult to try to get people to imagine what it's like being in this forest.
Yeah.
It's sort of broken and open with a lot of clearings and things that people can easily navigate through, but you may encounter thorns, sharp rocks, adders, snakes,
large insects,
scorpions, large venomous insects, sand, lack of water, scorching heat, everything like that. And so I think, and our desert campaign, was that more desert? Or
no, it was pure desert.
It was pure desert, just sand.
Pure desert, yeah.
I seem to remember a little bit of it, though, that there was some scrub trees.
Here and there in the outlying spots.
Okay.
But not a whole lot. No, that wasn't savanna. That was just clear and present a desert.
Okay, and the thing is that, an open desert, of course, isn't really like a forest, even though you may have a bunch of saguaro cactus and stuff here and there. It's something like, so this is an interesting story. I lived in Texas, in the hill country, and so I knew about like open savanna woodlands. When we went to Hawaii, there's a part on the Big Island, the southwestern side of the Big Island. It's a lot of sun, and as you're driving around, I kept looking out the window and seeing all the scrub brush and the open rocks, and I was like, man, this looks like West Texas.
Yeah,
truly.
Savanna.
Yeah, I was kind of confused because
the tall dry grasses.
Tall dry grass. It's the yellow dried brush, the sharp rocks, the lack of vegetation, the lack of ground cover. It was really interesting. I was kind of shocked. I'm like, man, I thought Hawaii was all jungle and vegetation and
but
deep
it actually
forest.
it has all but I think one or two tropical
environmental zones.
Yeah,
it's got quite a few, and I was like, wow, this is just like West Texas driving through here.
Cloud forest. You ascend into the world of perpetual mist, where the air is cool and damp. The ground is slippery with moss, and every surface seems alive with ferns and orchids clinging to the trunks of towering trees. Kind of like what you would imagine Japan and China and places like that, with the pandas. And
that or the Andes. The thick cloud forest that you have around the ruins in Peru and stuff like that. It's an interesting setting because I don't think I've ever really encountered any kind of settings for it. What would a cloud forest be? Well, it's essentially this sort of adventure where things aren't as they seem. The visibility is limited. Things can come out of the mist at you. You don't really see where you're going or what you're doing. It's easy to get turned around. Stuff like that, and it's an interesting sort of setting.
Yeah, you'd have things like harpies or hidden monasteries and ancient beings shrouded in mystery.
Yeah, lots of ruins, lots of steep pathways and gorges that you have to cross. Limited visibility, not a lot of sunlight, that sort of thing. And people who live there probably are very superstitious. They probably have a lot of beliefs in beings that live in the mist and sounds and things.
Yeah,
really kind of an interesting setting.
Yep. Temperate rainforest. Now, we kind of hit upon the rainforest and even kind of a temperate rainforest, but this is the kind that's in the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah.
The forest is lush and green, every surface draped with moss, ferns and lichen that thrive in a near constant dampness. Towering conifers like Douglas firs, cedars, spruces stretch skyward, their massive trunks cloaked in a living tapestry of greenery. The air is cool, filled with the earthy scent of wet soil and decaying wood. Raindrops from the canopy creating a gentle, rhythmic pattern. Shafts of light filter through the mist, turning the forest floor into the realm of glowing emerald hues. Fallen logs become nurse trees, sprouting new life, and the sound of distant creek adds a serene melody to the tranquil scene. But despite its beauty, the forest feels ancient and watchful, as though its secrets are not freely given.
Well, yeah, I mean, if anybody's ever been around the giant sequoias or redwoods or the coastal forest, it can get thick. I mean, those huge trees block out the sun. I mean,
you can get lost really easy.
It's pretty easy to get
fast.
lost. You can't see everything around because the canopy is so big. I tend to really like this kind of forest. It's just, it really appeals to me. Now, I mean, you can have different kind of creatures that live there. I mean, the woodland sprites, fawns, fairies, tree ants again, different sorts of trolls, different sorts of goblins. Well, yetis, Sasquatches, beings like that, forest beings, druids, forest druids, wizards, witches, elves of all kinds, good elves, bad elves,
wood elves.
Wood elves seems something like that.
Yeah.
In adventure set in a setting like that, and I think you're going to have to kind of take into account the fact, that you're really limited, in what you can see and how you can act. It's easy to get ambushed in.
And these trees are usually very ancient.
Yeah.
Your redwoods, trees that are so big that you could have 3 or 4 people reaching around and still not reach around a tree because they're so big and they're so old and they've seen so much.
I tend to think that when you have elven forests, when they say that elves live in the canopies of the trees and they have cities in the trees, you're talking about something like this. You're talking about a big temperate rainforest where you've got enormous 300-foot trees that the elves are living in, that sort of thing. And they have, bridges that go between the trees and you have to climb up rope ladders to get up there. That's sort of what I think.
Yeah. So we hit upon most of the types of forests. There's probably more that you could come up with if you wanted to.
Yeah.
But we just wanted to kind of throw those out there and give you an idea on how to describe your forest when your characters are walking through them. Because it adds so much air. The forest to me is so alive and has so much, there's so much that you can absorb from a forest.
Yeah, it's almost as if when you're playing D&D or Pathfinder or whatever, you almost want to be like doing a LARP in a forest as you're playing so that you get the full sort of experience of running through the woods, of hiding behind trees, of being ambushed, of coming across something that's been hidden, of following trails, of crossing bridges. That's why in my opinion, a lot of games end up in forests because they just have so much to offer when it comes to setting.
Yeah, hiding things and...
There's so much there, so much magic, so much adventure.
Most civilizations are built on the edge of a forest because you've got trees to cut down, and there's usually game.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to hear from people, players and DMs, how you construct your settings in sort of a woodland setting. If you include that in, if you don't, how you incorporate that, and how you try to create this sort of sense of adventure in like a woodlands or something, and how you bring that forth to your players, how you describe it to them.
Yeah. So anyway, we hope you like this episode of Wizards of the Tower.
Roleplay.
May all your adventures not be in a haunted forest that's deep and dark and dangerous.
But may they be epic anyway.
Thanks, folks.
Thank you, folks.